Recording. So a couple of logistics with Replit. Make sure that you have your first and last name added to your account so that we can find you and give you your grade for your progress. The link to our Replit Teams is here. Once you have an account, in the upper left-hand corner, there's Profile and Account. One of those buttons allows you to edit your first and last name. Please have it match what's in Synergy. Don't have it be something weird. I know there's an albino cucumber out there somewhere, and so whoever you are, make sure you identify yourself with first and last name. Then secondly, there is test cases. This is what it looks like on the grading end. Coding that I think is a bit simpler. And I wanted to review unit tests because I think I glanced over that a bit too quickly the first time around. These are the 4 that are required of you to do this Friday. Notice they relate to arrays and array lists because that's the topic we are reviewing. It's not the first 4 from the list of FRQs. It's look for the names: word list, sound, digit, and gizmo. Let's say you're done running the code or you're done writing the code for a given FRQ. You want to notice like this menu, right? You're inside the Java file, you wrote out the code over here. Then I want you to go click on this little check mark on the left-hand side along this menu bar. That's where you'll find the unit tests. Okay, and I think all but Gizmo have some tests for you to run. That's where you'll see the little check marks. When you click on this green check mark along the side, click on Run Tests, and then it'll tell you whether you got things right or wrong. And ideally, you get all green for these things. I updated digits yesterday afternoon, so those exist now. And I think we're still working with how to best make use of this unit tests and give you some useful information because as you've seen with word list, if you fail a test, it doesn't really tell you anything particular. It's buried amongst all this other code. All that you see is like, it failed, expected 1, but you gave me 0 or something. Not very informative. Okay, so that's unit tests. That's where you'll see these green check marks in your console window, and ideally you see all green. Definitely run the code like this afternoon. For each of the FRQs, click on Run Tests to ensure that you have all green check marks. There might be 1 or 2 things you need to change about your code in order to get green check marks saying that everything passed. Okay, and then be sure to click Submit. You are allowed to resubmit whenever you want. I don't think you have to play that game of tag like you do in Google Classroom, where once you submit, you have to wait till the teacher resubmits in order to edit again. I believe you're allowed to submit and resubmit whenever. Okay, so jumping down, the other day we talked about word list. We went over the rubric for word list and how it is scored. Today we can do some live grading of the sound FRQ, and I'll be seeking a volunteer from this class on would you like to see your code graded in real time for sound parts A and B. Okay, cool. Denton is my volunteer. Nice. So we'll take a look. I'm going to have the rubric on one side. I'm going to have Denton's code on the other. And we'll go through and look and see if how Denton does according to the rubrics. And that should bring us to the end of class. If you need help with the gizmo or the sound, actually no, gizmo or digits FRQ, there are a couple of slides on it, and we won't mention it today. We'll kind of save it for the beginning of next week to do this live grading so you can learn what AP readers are looking for. All right, so give me a moment to find the code for this particular student. There's the answer key. I'll have this on one side, make it smaller. I think I have to reshare my screen as I have to find the Replit, so bear with me. you may want to have open your answer to sound, and so you can kind of self-grade as I'm talking through what gets points and stuff. Okay, so I'm switching over. I'm looking for Denton's submission for sound. Okay, a lot of people have it open right now. That's good. Okay, stop sharing for a second. Start sharing for a second. Hold desktop, share. Okay. So just to confirm, you see 2 tabs right now, yes? Thumbs up? Okay. People are nodding, that's good. Let me go to sound.java. So while I'm here, notice that if you press the run button, it shows you the code that's in main.java. It runs and you should see some output. That's different than in unit tests, okay? This stuff. Notice while I'm here demonstrating, click on the check mark, and then you see these tests. When you click run, it does some things, and then you'll see the results. Uh-oh. So it looks like 2 out of the 7 pass. This could have been some change. Oops, sorry. My mistake. Like, I'm pretty sure I ran this code with yours, Denton, and it passed the other day. So maybe it's something on my end that went wrong. But notice, like, we got 5 tests failing at the moment, and 5 tests failing, and maybe we'll see why in a bit. But notice, like, one of them did pass, so you saw that green check mark, like, over here, right? Part A4 passed, but then this one didn't, part A3. So this is part A of the sound FRQ, that function. I tried to make my error messages a bit more informative, as in my sound array looked like this. And when you do limit amplitude of 0, all numbers should have gotten changed. So this one is saying that no numbers were changed. So I don't know if there was some kind of updating or syncing issue. Perhaps I chose the wrong student. Because let's see if there's any code written. I think I chose the right student. No, this is mine. Ah, no wonder. Okay, I have not pulled up the correct student's FRQ. No wonder. Okay, so back to the thingy. I want to look at Denton's. Any questions about test cases? If it does come up, ask me now. I need to click on View Submissions. Okay, now I look for the name. There it is. All right. So here, right? Okay, this thing's kind of annoying. It happens to me all the time. Plugin crashed. It's a Replit issue. It's not a U issue. Although it's red and annoying. All up in your face. All right, so yeah, when Denton runs tests, he passes everything. So most likely you'll get all the points, but we will see. So I'm going back to his code. I'm going to make this window smaller. And I'm going to make this window smaller because we don't need it. Oh, yes we do. We need to navigate to the Java file first. Sound. There we are. All right, we're in business. Move this menu, move this here. Okay. All right, so the first part is limit amplitude. That's part A, and that's this function which we'll be focusing on. Get my little pencil, see that it's working. Yep, it is. Okay, so first off, 3 points are for identifying elements of samples to be modified and modified as required. So the first of these 3 points is consider elements of samples. They break it down further. Half a point for accessing more than one element of sample. Let's see. In Denton's code at the moment, he does access more than one element of sample, here and here. He writes a little loop, starts at 0, x is his index, yep. So he accesses them. Accesses every element of sample, no bound errors. So let's go in and check. So he starts at 0, that's the very first thing, goes up to, but not including length, so he isn't off by 1 at all based on this for loop. He doesn't do any fancy index manipulation here, so he doesn't go out of bounds. So it looks like he does in fact access every element of sample. Think about if your array length was 0, would this code handle it appropriately? That was mentioned somewhere in the prompt where it said like it's not guaranteed to be like full or something like that. So good job. You got this first point out of 3. You did these things. Then the the other 2 points out of this 3-point category, you have to identify and change elements of sample. That break it down further. Compares an element of samples with limit and changes at least one element to limit or positive limit and negative limit. Okay, so here is his comparisons. That happens. There's his half point. Changes at least one element to limit or negative limit. Let's see, here's positive limit, there's negative limit. Check. So then he gets this point. Changes all and only elements that exceed plus or minus limit to negative and positive limit appropriately. Okay, so this one we have to check his logic. Get my pencil, erase these markings. So if the sample is bigger than his non-negative number called limit, then you must change it to be the limit. Neat. And then post limits gets increased. Great. That was part of the return types. I think that's the second category. So we'll comment on it when we get there. Then down here in his else if, how do I make that go away? Click, click. Okay. Then for his second if statement, if else if samples is less than the negative version of limit, then samples must be the negative version of limits. So this, I think, was a little room for error. If you forgot how negative numbers work in comparisons, be careful. This one properly addresses the switching, and then he increases his little counter called post limits. Good job. So far, he has 3 points. The other 1.5 points we move to now. Over here, calculate and return number of changed elements of sample. 1.5 points gets devoted to this category. So this relates to the return type, this thing. So you can see here, there's your free point when you initialize and updates a counter to achieve the correct number of changed samples. So over here, his variable called post limits is initialized, and then he does some increasing here and here at the appropriate times, and then at the very bottom he returns it. So that's this point here, and then the half point for returning an updated counter, which is inside the if statements that do the array access, full points with this solution. Good job. Okay, let me clear. Actually, before I clear, questions or comments? Next week I'll be looking over some people's answers, and hopefully I can find a FRQ that's like partially the way there, so you can see how much partial credit you can get. Incomplete solutions that still would yield a good amount of points. Okay, so I'm clearing. In my block 6 video, we got like a student volunteered and he got half a point off because his indexing in his for loop was a little bit off. He did x less than samples.length minus 1, and so he was off by 1 in how he addressed his arrays, and he lost a point over here, half a point. Right, so going on, let's look at part B. The solutions are here upside down. Let's see how Denton tackled this problem. So we'll scroll down. sorry, I forgot to explain what the FRQ was doing. So in part A, you're given an array, and anything that exceeds like this number that they give you, you change it to be that limit. In part B, we are removing leading zeros from a given array. Sounds familiar. You've done likely something like this in a coding back problem. So be careful not to remove like all adjacent zeros. It's just the leading ones that you care about. In this part, there's nothing to be returned. So in my test cases, I checked to see that the array contained the correct like number values, although the function didn't return anything for me to compare to. Okay. So let's go ahead and grade this code. Trying to get it all to fit. Okay, that's just the for loop I'm cutting off. Is that okay? There we go. Okay, so all of it fits. Remove this menu bar. So trim silence from beginning. We have this breakdown. I think parts A and B total to 9 points, as like an FRQ does nowadays. First up, we are to identify leading zero valued elements of samples, 1.5 points, and break it down as such. Access every leading zero element of samples. Let's see if I can find that. Every leading element. All right, so as I'm looking at his code, I like this, samples being compared to 0. Does he do more comparisons? Interesting. So give me a moment to kind of read through and understand what's happening in this student's code. So he has two loops, an outer loop and an inner loop. An outer loop called X that's based on samples. That's, I think, the unedited array with leading zeros. If the first thing is equal to 0, replacement equals new int sample length minus 1. Okay, so this is my array. We now know the size. And then for int y equals 0, y less than, okay, replacement y equals this thing. Oh, okay, this is an interesting algorithm. So I think this code is removing leading zeros 1, 0 at a time and copying everything else over. Neat. That's why there's 2 loops present. I think this could be done in 1 loop, but this is pretty neat. I haven't seen this solution just yet. Okay, so does he access every leading element? Yeah, I didn't think of this either. This wasn't my answer, and that wasn't what immediately came to me. But I think it works because as you remove 1, 0 at a time, right, and then you go to the next iteration of the loop, you would now have an array that's a little bit smaller. And if it's not equal to 0, like you're already doing that copying, the whole list at a time, or the whole array happens. So I think that you access every leading 0. I'm trying to work through a test case in my head. If I had like 2 zeros in here, would it still work? If I had 3 zeros, if I had no zeros, then if you have no zeros, what happens? You're inside this if statement. Okay, this thing isn't true, so then you break. You go on to the next thing. Hold on, something's weird. If I have like an array 1, 2, 3, will that stuff, well, okay, this is fine, right? Because it's fine because, yeah, there's no changes in your samples array. You don't make any modifications. So then your samples array stays put, which is good. Like no touching, it's fine. Only modify the array if there are leading zeros. Otherwise, you already have your answer. So this is a-okay. Compare 0 and elements of samples. Yes. Compare 0 and multiple elements of sample. Yes. The ways it's phrased, I little like wonder about multiple elements. It does happen because he has nested loops, right? It doesn't happen just once, it happens again and again and again, perhaps even too many times. Okay, clean up my code. So he got the first 1.5 points. And next, we create array of proper length. So I think they wanted you to use pointers, right? Or have two separate arrays. You have your samples, you have your like temporary array that has the editing, and then later it should point to the correct array. So then Denton here does in fact do that right there. His replacement array is of the proper length. Let's read the half-point breakdowns. Determines correct number of elements to be in resulting array. All right, so this is where it gets tricky because like his code works, but according to the rubric, like this isn't a correct calculation of the like final array length. It happens over time. It happens over some like it is of the proper length at the very end, but in the process it isn't because he's still processing it. So I'm unsure about how a reader would grade this part because the rubric seems to match like their algorithm of doing it. But this works. So I'll have to consult Mr. Simon on whether or not you get the points here. Like for sure you get this half point because you make the length of whatever calculation you decided on. This part is the one I'm unsure about. Okay, so I'll have to go back and ask a very experienced AP test grader on whether or not this code would get this half point. I'm tempted to give it to you, but I want to see what the proper rubric solution would have yielded. Okay, so likely 1 point here, possibly half point deduction. I'll update you. 2 points on remove silence values from sample. Half a point for copying some values other than leading zeros. Yes, that happens here. He does all copies of things over. So then copies all and only values other than leading zeros, preserving original order. Let's see. Other than leading zeros. So this is also one I have to draw a question mark on, right? Because in the process, you do copy leading zeros over, but by the end of your outer loop, you do remove them, just like one at a time. So it relates to the same question I'm going to ask Mr. Simon. I'm tempted to give you the 1 point here, but maybe according to the rubric, because you do copy things other than leading zeros, maybe you won't get the half point. I'm unsure. So let me go ask Mr. Simon to get the definite answer. Lastly, modifies instant variables samples to reference newly created array. Yep, that's this part. Once he has replacements there, it points to the right thing. So worst case, there is 1 point off from this section based on this like 2-loop format and Denton's algorithm. It does end up with the final solution being correct in the very end, but those intermediate steps on copying leading zeros, I'll get back to. Best case, you have full points. Worst case, you lose 1 point. Questions or comments? No? Okay. So Mr. Simon is going to do his version of this live grading on some student work with rubrics, and I asked that he record it because he's been doing it for much longer, and you can trust his word much better than mine because he's graded FRQs in the past as part of the reading team for the College Board. He got paid to do it. So look out for his videos. For today's class, that's all I had planned. So you all can go a couple minutes early. Enjoy your Friday. And get in those assignments. Let me know if you want anything regraded before the end of the marking period.